Hello, this video is to talk about the approach, the implementation, and to reflect on the educational technologies that I trialled in this assignment. So I think it's useful, first of all, to have a look and consider the literature around this area. And I was particularly struck by some of the work I read, particularly about online and mobile technologies opening up exciting new possibilities for study in higher education. And that actually, because of changing student profiles, the pervasive influence of technologies and the pressure to produce work-ready graduates, that these are all themes that are informing how we need to develop our curriculum in the current century. And then I also noted a word of caution that actually simply adding a layer of technology on top of existing provision without changing or reflecting on the pedagogy will not magically increase student engagement. And I think those are all very important things to bear in mind when we're developing new resources and implementing technological change. So my first question was really, what technology should I use? And so I attended a number of workshops and tried various things out. So the first thing I tried out was using multimedia on Moodle to enhance learning. So I used labels, I learnt to embed photos more effectively, and video from other sources. And I also learnt to use Padlet, which I utilised in a module that I was delivering on. I also attended a session on peer assessment, and that felt quite clunky and difficult on Moodle to set up. The principle was interesting, and I do something similar in an offline way at the moment, which is why I was interested in it. But actually, I didn't feel that the technology for that was quite there and in a useful state at the moment. And then the third thing I tried out was Screencastomatic, so video capture of lectures. This seemed relatively straightforward for me, and I could see very useful potential applications for it. And that's what I'll be concentrating on most of this video for. So Screencastomatic, I trialled first of all an audio version of a screencast on a Year 2 module that I'm the module leader of called TV Studio. But then I was also struck by some research that I read from Guo et al. Not sure if I'm pronouncing his name right, but he and his colleagues remarked that actually talking heads, so video talking heads, were more engaging than slides with simply audio. So I thought, right, well, I'll try out using the video function as well. And he also went on to explain that actually videos that had a more personal feel were more engaging for students, and that formal settings like a classroom weren't very engaging at all for videos, but that an informal setting would be far better. And therefore, I created 2 further video screencasts for years 1 and 2 live production modules who get taught together but have different assessments. And I recorded the videos at home. And I tried to make them more friendly in the language I used and the approach I took to them. So I took that advice on board. So reflecting on what I did and how it went, the embedding of images onto Moodle was very straightforward and is something that I've adopted as part of my everyday practice. It seemed very good for inclusive learning and teaching, particularly appealing to visual learners. And ethically, I thought that was very sound using Getty images, which the university fortunately has an account with, because that meant we weren't exploiting anybody's copyright, which would be unethical, obviously. I also tried out Moodle Glossary. This was probably my least successful intervention. I think it does have long-term potential, but it needs much more time than I was able to devote to it, and much more student involvement. I did talk to the students about it. I tried to get them involved, but it wasn't something they immediately picked up on, and therefore it's a work in progress at the moment, and it's something that I intend continuing with in future. Padlet I found was very good, particularly for ideas development, and it worked particularly well on the live production module. And one of the reasons for this was the technological aspect of it, because I'm teaching 2 year groups together, years 1 and 2, and they have different Moodles, and they also use a Facebook group as well. And using Padlet, I was able to embed the Padlets on all these platforms, and they updated across the platforms, and that would have been very difficult to do using another technology. Trust was needed because the students could have gone in and they could have deleted their own Padlets, they could have deleted each other's Padlets, but they didn't, and that trust was well placed in them. So Screencastomatic was the technology that I concentrated most on, and I think had the greatest success on. So I'm now going to talk a little bit about the advantages and disadvantages of video lecturing. I found Screencastomatic straightforward to use. The functionality of it was fairly intuitive, with pausing and re-editing and re-recording. That was all fairly straightforward. You'll see examples of one of my Screencastomatics on the Padlet that I'm submitting. It was very easy to embed it on Moodle, just dragging and dropping it. And it was a useful resource, particularly I found for important information, say regarding assessment information and advice. And it meant that students who'd missed that lecture or who wanted to go over the presentation in their own time as they prepared their submissions could do so. And I thought it was very relevant to inclusive learning and teaching. It appeals to visual learners because they've got something to look at. And also it means that people can go forwards and backwards and take their own time, work at their own pace, which if a student has a disability, particularly a learning disability like dyslexia or something like that, could be very useful for them. There are some disadvantages, and it's important not to be too rosy-eyed about these things. The videos do take time to create, so that mustn't be underestimated. It's also, I found to my cost, necessary to reformat your PowerPoint slides to accommodate the video inset. So you'll notice, hopefully on this recording, that I have made space for the video inset. And not all lecturers would like to video themselves and hear themselves, and maybe even worse, see themselves. So that's a factor to take into account. And it could be used as a method to reduce contact time. So I think that's something to beware of, and to make sure that doesn't happen. It's great when we can create these resources as additional and flipping the classroom rather than using them as a substitute for class time, because I don't think that's how they should be used to the best advantage. And then just some concluding thoughts. I'm definitely going to continue using video lecturing. I was very pleased with the feedback I got from the students about the use of it, and you'll see that on the Padlet. And I'm also going to encourage my colleagues to adopt it. You'll see from my CPD development plan how I intend to do that. And I also want to definitely experiment with other educational technologies, having now whetted my appetite with this. And then one of the student comments that came back on the feedback when I was asking them for feedback in questionnaires, I thought was particularly apposite to keep in mind. So this student, I don't know who it was, it's anonymous, said technology is becoming a greater influence on everyday lives. Therefore, it's essential to integrate it more into teaching. And I thought that was a very insightful comment. And I'm going to keep that comment with me as I develop my teaching practice.